Hey everyone, welcome back into Sports in the Mitten podcast, powered by Mr. Spots. I am Thomas Bendit here with Adam Biggers. Adam, how's it going tonight?
I'm doing well, Thomas. It was a busy but productive Sunday, and I thought it was going to be kind of relaxing through the night, and then boom, the Florida thing happened. So here we are, and real quick, I want to thank everybody who's watching the live streams on not only on my channel but right now on the Sports in the Mitten YouTube channel, and also everybody listening to us on iTunes or the FanRag Sports Blog Talk Radio channel as well. You can find the podcast, whether it's a live stream version or just want to just hear a recorded version. You can find those versions out there. So yeah, it's I guess this news kind of changes the dynamic of Florida Michigan a little bit. Not a ton in my mind, but a little bit, and we'll talk about that tonight, and we'll field some of your guys' questions from Twitter as well. So it's going to be a fun show.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, let's just jump into the big news, which is 7 Florida players have been announced to be suspended. There was a little bit of the details are a little bit complicated, but regardless, it's a little bit of a credit card issue. Like I said, it's kind of an odd situation, but nonetheless, McElwain, Florida's head coach, announced they would be suspending 7 Gators for the first game, which is obviously in Dallas against the Wolverines on Labor Day weekend. That's Saturday. And, most of the suspensions are relatively minor in terms of significance as far as the game goes. Really 5 of the 7 players, at least from the outside perspective, I don't think we're set to contribute very significantly. But 2 of the players are big ones. And the first is Antonio Callaway, who is Florida's returning receiving leader. That's obviously a pretty significant one. And then Davis, who is a D lineman, he had a roughly 30 tackles last year, expected to be in the 2 deep rotation on the defensive line. So 2 big losses in a game that for most has been, I believe Vegas has it a couple points in Michigan's favor, but really has been a coin flip, at least from most publications this summer. So, I mean, to lose 2 players of that caliber, pretty big. Adam, did you have any initial reactions to when you heard about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and immediately, when I heard it was Antonio Callaway, one player, I think regardless of how good they are, I don't think the absence of one player makes a big difference. And again, the other player, what is it, Keanu? I don't know how to say his first name. Davis.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna take a shot at that.
Kevanis Davis. He's a junior defensive end, Kevanis Davis, and Keanu started in like 5 games last year. But so he was the other guy that was kind of likely to be in the a contributor, I guess. And reading from Andy Staples' report, it's just redshirt freshman, sophomore, a freshman, another freshman. So again, not veteran or experienced players. But when I heard Antonio Callaway, he's regarded as one of the best receivers going into the 2018 NFL draft class. Walter Football ranked him at number 5. And speaking of 5, I want to make a correction. Earlier, I tweeted that Antonio Callaway had the 3rd longest receiving touchdown of any receiver in the SEC last year, 78 yards. It was actually the 5th longest. So I apologize. But I mean, he's 5'11", about 200 pounds, 195 pounds, and he's a speedster. He's incredibly dangerous. So this is a guy. I mean, those type of playmaking receivers. And when I think of how young Michigan's secondary is going to be, athletically, I think they could keep up. But when you're looking at a guy like Antonio Callaway, I think he's capable of exposing young players. And I think when you look at where can a team be most exposed, and Thomas, you and I have had this conversation several times, I think it is in the secondary. So, he's a guy who runs a 4.45 40. That's just a little, 0.4 of a second slower than what Donovan Peoples-Jones runs it. So, I mean, talking in terms of relative speed, playmaking ability, Antonio Callaway is a big absence, but at the same time, I mean, Thomas, as you know, it's more than just one guy that makes the game. But when I heard it's Antonio Callaway, my immediate thoughts, maybe a little bit of pressure, even if it's mentally lifted off Michigan's defensive backs, and they're not going to say that. And maybe it does change the game plan a slight bit, but I don't think anybody at Michigan's going to say that. I don't think anybody at Florida is going to say that. They're going to say, we're going in this game with the same mentality. My final note, though, on Antonio Callaway, and Alex Colo over at FanRag wrote a nice column, and I retweeted that. Antonio Callaway, Thomas, has been a guy, and I want to get your legal. For those who don't know, Thomas is a lawyer by day, podcaster by night. So I want to get some of your legal expertise on this. I mean, Antonio Callaway is a guy who, back in spring, was cited for a marijuana charge. He was with a 40-year-old, Kendrick Williams, who's got a lengthy. I just Googled the guy's name, found he was connected to shootings in Florida, cocaine charges, child molestation. I mean, we're talking a rap sheet, not just a guy who gets in some trouble. We're talking about a guy who does some serious stuff. And here you are, you're Antonio Callaway, who you've had several chances. And I want to read something from Alex's column because I think it kind of just lends some perspective. And I think maybe this is addition by subtraction for Florida. He's a hell of a player, but this guy, reading from Alex, Callaway was suspended for 2016 spring practice while the university investigated a sexual assault case brought against the wide receiver. He was ultimately found not responsible in a Title IX hearing because he was, quote, so stoned that he, quote, had no interest in having sex with anyone. And he's riding around with a 40-year-old guy who's got, drug charges and not just marijuana. We're talking cocaine, some serious stuff going on here. So, I mean, I look at the athletic part of how it impacts it, but at the same time, Florida, I mean, does that, is it addition by subtraction? I mean, things like this can actually kind of create a little bit of internal momentum. You know what I mean? Like, okay, we got rid of a bad apple. Legally, though, this credit card stuff, I mean, how serious is this?
From what I've read, I don't necessarily think it's going to be that serious from a legal perspective. I think this is more of just a coach sort of stepping in and trying to put down the tone, I guess, for the program. But again, I honestly can't sit here and pretend to know the facts inside and out as far as this case is concerned. I'm basically where everyone else is, just reading about it. Obviously I'm like you, we're not as in tune day to day, on what's going on with Florida and the team and where these facts are sort of coming out. But yeah, I mean, it's a serious issue, but from what I've read, the amounts weren't necessarily that huge. So I can't anticipate anything massive would be coming down the pipes as far as the legal system. But, obviously one game suspended. I think for me, I think these are pretty significant suspensions. And I realize, I agree, one player is not going to decide this game one way or the other. These are two teams with a lot of talent, with enough guys coming back, a lot of new faces. It's hard to sit here and say, player X got suspended. Suddenly, that's going to shift the entire game. But if you're Michigan coming into this game, I think the two things that concern me the most is, number one, the secondary. And again, this is in the grand picture of, obviously this team is going to look so much different than it did last year. Just so many different faces. But I think the number one thing is the secondary. How is that going to look? How many big plays are they going to give up? Because, maybe I'm a little too optimistic about Michigan's defense. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of good playmakers they're going to have next year. But I feel like, generally speaking, they're going to be able to handle Florida on a play-to-play basis. I think the issue is how many big home run type of plays are they going to give up in the secondary? That burned them against Florida State a couple of times. They gave up Lewis and I believe it was Metellus gave up that huge pass from almost the goal line, essentially. I forget how long it was, but I mean, that had to be a 80-yard pass, something like that, for a touchdown. How many of those types of plays do they get burned on? Because if suspending Callaway reduces that from maybe 5 to 3, that might be the difference in the game, to be honest. And I think the second biggest thing that you're worried about if you're Michigan coming into this game is the O-line. Are they going to be able to get push? Are they going to be able to protect Spate or O'Korn, I guess? Probably Spate. Yeah, Yeah. Is the line going to be able to protect them? Are they going to get some positive rushing yardage in this one? And, knocking out at least one rotational D lineman certainly helps in that efforts, I would think. So overall, I think these are pretty significant, but certainly, Michigan fans shouldn't be sitting back thinking this is going to be an easy one now.
I want to ask you a broader legal question, but also real quick, I want to mention about Antonio Callaway. And I know I just got done saying it, and Thomas, we both are in agreement that one player isn't going to necessarily decide the game. But when you do look at, and again, going to the secondary, and I'm feeling that's a position group that's more apt to be exposed, on defense. You look at a guy like Callaway, and I'm looking at his stats. He had at least 7 catches, or he had in 7 games last year. He had at least 1 catch of 20 yards or more.
Wow. Yeah. Big play right there.
51-yarder against Tennessee was not a touchdown. He had a 78-yard catch against Kentucky. That was a touchdown. He had a 24-yard catch against Alabama. That was a touchdown. He had a 34-yard catch against when they trounced Iowa in the Outback Bowl 30-3. That was a 34-yard catch, no touchdown. So, I guess in my mind, maybe it does tone down. And I guess if I'm a Michigan defensive back and I'm breaking down stats and things like that, and I'm watching film on Callaway, I don't know how much they've really gotten to film prep yet, but I imagine it, not having to deal with that is probably some sort of mental relief. And then my broad legal question would be, just in general, and I want to preface this and make sure I'm doing it the legal way. In no shape or form is this commentary directly related to what's going on with the Florida Gators players. Is that legal enough, Thomas? Does that work?
Yeah, sure, I guess.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the question is, so.
Just in general terms, though, what type of punishments can range? And we're not talking about a ton of money here, but what types of, punishment, the range of the punishment when you're looking at using credit cards that aren't yours?
That's a pretty huge question. Even generally, basically what's going to happen is if you have something like credit card fraud, which again, I don't even know if that really happened in this case. Again, the stuff I'm reading, I really can't say as far as what the specific facts were. So I don't really want to link that, to this case at all, but generally speaking, what's going to happen is if you're charged with it, you're going to go in, you're either going to, plead not guilty, assuming you are convicted. If you're not guilty, you would have your sentencing hearing later on, which the judges are usually, the prosecutor will make a recommendation. Given the amounts in this case, and again, I really don't want to speculate as far as this case
is not
goes.
Connected. I was just asking in general terms.
I really can't say it because it depends on your past record. It depends on a number of factors going down, how old you are. Some of these guys, I'm not sure. I thought I saw one was a freshman, so theoretically they could still be 17. There's just a lot of factors that go into things like sentencing. It's really a case-by-case thing, but they'll usually have a range, and then they'll kind of go off of that. But sorry to not answer the question at all, but it's just it's really tough to nail down something like that.
Well, and I guess I asked that so that way, and again, this is not directly connected to the Florida Gators players, but I guess just in general speaking, because it is interesting to know when you hear things thrown around, it is kind of interesting to know, okay, what are the ramifications of these? And I'll say this, and again, with Antonio Callaway, this is a guy who has a track record of, and Jim McElwain even said it this past spring, of hanging around the wrong people and not making the best types of decisions. So, and Thomas, tell me if I'm crossing the legal line here. If I'm a guy like Antonio Callaway and I'm being charged with some type of credit card fraud, I would imagine that I'm, with the things that have already happened in the past, that they're probably not going to look at me favorably in the event, like you said, like when a prosecutor has to say, or when a prosecutor gives his recommendation to the judge, well, we're looking at this guy and look, he, was involved in sexual assault. he's got marijuana charges, this, that, and the other. I have to believe that they're probably not going to look favorably upon a guy like that.
Yeah, I mean, sentencing hearings, they're a lot broader. A lot more evidence can be brought in. Sometimes that's inadmissible in a standard court hearing. So depending, again, on the situation, which I really can't comment on, maybe some of that stuff could come in. I'm not really sure as far as it goes generally. But I will say, I just on a brief, 5-second search here, I think generally the felony amount for like credit card fraud is like $5,000. So if it's below, usually you're going to be looking at a misdemeanor, which again, like I said, in this case, I have no idea whether there's going to be any charges filed or anything like that. But again, the smaller amounts, you're going to usually get off with a lot lighter of a penalty if, obviously found guilty.
And again, if you guys are watching the live stream on our Sports in the Mitten channel, feel free to ask questions. We do have some from Twitter. And before we get into those, Thomas and the listeners, if you guys don't mind, I want to send out a couple of congratulations. Mike Ross, one of our Flint Wolves summer leaguers, made the mock college baseball team today, fall tryout. So congratulations to him. And wanted to wish luck real quick to all of our guys at college, the core of our team. We really rely on these guys. Luke Copley of Holly, he's at Rochester. Caleb Fleischer of Kersley, he's at Rochester. Parker Barnett of Flint Carmen Ainsworth, he's at Judson University. Noah Reed of Flint Carmen Ainsworth, he is at Cornerstone. So again, thanks to those guys this summer, and good luck. And it was a good day already, Thomas. Like I said, it was productive. I mowed my lawn, did a bunch of yard work, cleaned out my garage, and then I got a text from Mike, and he's like, "I made the team," and I said, "Hell yeah, good job." So it's been a satisfying day. It's gonna get better though. We'll get into these questions, and I guess what I will do. Some of them are directed at me, but I'm gonna turn the tables. How's that, Thomas? And I'm gonna throw them at you. So I want to pick out the best one here. Because, okay, well, this is more of a comment, and I promised that we would get to it. This one comes from Brett Piunti. I hope I'm saying that right, Brent. Let me know. No one gave a SHIT that we lost our starting left tackle early in the season last year, or when Jabril Peppers didn't play against Florida State. Michigan would have won. I guess what do you think of that in terms of? I mean, last year, put yourself in the shoes of a Michigan fan before the Orange Bowl. Jabril Peppers isn't playing. Would that have made a huge difference to you? Would it have made a huge difference to you last year if Grant Newsome didn't get injured? Are those things that you still think about?
I will say I have a similar answer to both of those. First, as far as Peppers goes, yeah, I absolutely think Michigan would have won that game if Peppers had been available. I mean, let's just start with the fact that thing literally came down to the last minute or so of the game. I mean, it was highly, highly competitive. And, I had actually watched the game back a week or two ago for a project Adam and myself are working on here in the next couple of weeks or so. But I would say that I think I really think it would have made a difference. I'll put it that way.
I'm trying to see some of these other ones that they're mostly comments. This past weekend, the past few days, really have gotten a ton of questions. And again, we wanted to hit on this Florida suspensions. This was major, and when something like this happens, we want to kind of make sure to at least discuss it. And it's going to be a story, like Thomas said. There's going to be more facts coming out, or there should be. And not all the facts are out, so don't. And I didn't mean to imply that Antonio Callaway in any way did commit credit card fraud. I was just it was more of a theoretical question. So,
but Adam, I did. You know what? I just thought about it. I didn't really answer the Newsome one.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Get that one.
But yeah, one of the biggest things, if anyone does have the chance to watch back that Florida State game. As far as Peppers goes, excuse me, that game was a complete game of inches. I know it came down, it was so close, but if you watch back, like so many plays, it's the margin for error and success is that small. I mean, early on, you had I I don't know if Peppers would have made a difference in this sense, but they got a turnover off of a botched punt for Florida State. They weren't able to punch it in. We mentioned that Jordan Lewis play earlier today where I wouldn't say he got burned, but him and another member of the secondary had a miscommunication, gave up a massive touchdown.
That was cover two. I asked Jordan about it, and I know exactly which player that you're talking about. So that was a cover two, and that was DeMonte Thomas's assignment.
Okay. But you think, maybe Peppers is on the field, maybe they're calling something different, maybe something.
Jordan didn't say it was DeMonte's. I'm inferring that, but he told me it was a cover two. Jordan never put it on anybody.
Yeah. But there's so many plays in that game, a few Cook runs where, if it would have been a 10-yard gain instead of a 30, it could have just changed things so massively. But as far as Newsome goes, I think he would have made a big difference. I mean, we've talked at length about how much the offensive line held this team back last year. And I think if they would have had a really good fifth lineman a couple extra times, I think that could have yielded some different results in that maybe the Iowa and Ohio State games.
I want to see agree or disagree. And this comment comes from Trevor at Michigan_1974. He's a longtime follower, reader, listener. Thomas, agree or disagree? Could be more pressure on Michigan now. They'll be expected to win. And this is in reference to the 7 suspended Gators. Yes or no?
Probably disagree. I think they already had a lot of pressure on them for this game already. It's a new season, a lot of new guys, but I think when you're on this kind of national stage, there's a lot of pressure to win, regardless of whether.
Does it at least increase it in your mind? Or is it still pressure?
Maybe it's like an 8.5 to an 8.6 or something. I'm not sure. Okay. I kind of think this was already kind of in the old must-win category. So,
and I'm forgetting his name. They lost their leading tackler, returning tackler. Hold on, real quick. I'll pull it up. I want to make sure it's on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember it.
I do recall reading something a few weeks back.
I think it's Marcel Harris.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar?
I do know that they lost their leading tackler to an injury. Returning.
I have to Google this now because I cannot leave it. I can't leave it like that. But I mean, they already had a key defensive player. My point is, they already had a key defensive player out for this game as well. So now, I guess now you add on a key offensive player and a contributing linebacker in Davis, but Antonio Callaway, for all the reasons that we just cited, kind of does change the dynamic a little bit. We want to know what you guys think. Tweet us at Mitten Sports MI. You can tweet me at Adam Biggers81, and you can tweet Thomas at T Bendit, and that's BEINDIT. Does the Callaway specifically, or the suspensions in general, does that in your mind increase the pressure? Does that in your mind change the game? So, and I believe that was. I'm not going to rest until I find out his name.
While you're doing that,
it was Marcel Harris. Okay, I thought for sure it was, and he's out for the year with a torn Achilles. So, and obviously that's never a good thing. An injury is never a good thing. He's out for the year. But if you're Michigan, in the back of your mind, you have to at least be thinking about that a little bit. Okay, the leading tackler is no longer available. And they knew this back in July when that happened. And now they're returning leading receiver. And Callaway had like 760 some odd yards last year. I mean, he's a guy, Thomas, as a freshman, he averaged almost 20 yards per catch. I mean, this guy, he is a dangerous player.
Yeah. But I was going to say, as you were looking for that, but luckily you found it quickly. But I was going to jump on to our other topic for today, which is the Lions preseason season kickoff was earlier today. First, did you happen to catch any of it today? Any thoughts? Okay. Any thoughts, reactions? or anything you're looking out of the preseason this year.
Did they win? Did they win?
I believe they did. I didn't watch the end of it, unfortunately. Yep, 24-10. The Lions beat the Colts, so celebrate.
Or they're going for another 4-0 preseason. I could sense it. I do not pay that much attention to the Lions, and honestly, today was such a nice day, and I felt like I had, like I said, some yard work. I had some other household work that I wanted to get done, and like football season is right here. I'm not gonna have time to do it probably at all. I might as well do it today. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I probably won't ever watch the Lions. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest.
Well, I'll hit on it for a second or two. I like to watch the beginning of these games because that's when they actually have, at least the second string in. Once it gets to the third and fourth, I'm sorry, I just don't really care that much about who's going to get the last roster spot on the Lions. It really doesn't matter that much. But yeah, I mean, I will say as far as Michigan's concerned, old Jake Rudock, he looked pretty solid. He was out there, ended up with 142 yards, 113 passer rating. He had some big plays, and I thought defensively, the one guy who was really impressive to me was A'Shawn Robinson, the D lineman, and I think he's set for a pretty big year as far as things are concerned. Not too many people pop that much. Again, it's preseason, so you have to keep it all in context. I look more for guys who jump off the screen, so to speak, and I thought Robinson was a guy who did that. So maybe he's up for a big year. We'll see.
I do. We did get a question on Twitter, and this one comes from one of my favorite followers, Intent to Receive at Nezzy21. He wants to know who starts at corner. And right now, I think it is Lavert Hill and David Long. I think it's those two, but I have heard pretty good things about Keith Washington. We have heard, some things about other guys, but for right now, I do think it is David Long and Lavert Hill. That could change. We learned. I do want to make a note real quick. We learned a little bit last week as far as I think the D line is going to be what we expected it to be. Brian Monet, Chase, Winovich, Rashawn, and Maurice Hurst. And nobody's blocking Maurice Hurst, Jim Harbaugh said Friday. He laughed about it. He's like, we can't even block Maurice Hurst because he was asked a question about which offensive lineman I think who's impressing or something like that, and he's something along those lines. The video's on my YouTube channel. And he said, we can't even block Maurice Hurst. He started laughing. So I think the defensive line is going to be what we think it's going to be. I mean, Mike McCray, Devin Bush, those are two guys that I think are locks at linebacker. And again, there are some other questions, but the offensive line, real quick, for those who didn't watch the previous podcast, I do believe it's going to be Mason Cole at left tackle, Ben Bredesen at left guard, Patrick Kugler at center, Mike Onwenu at right guard, and Juwan Bushell-Beatty at right tackle. Other than that, I don't know if there's any other things to discuss. It. And as he does mention, he thinks Brandon Watson, Thomas maybe by midseason. Who knows? We have heard a little bit about Brandon Watson, and I think Thomas. My final thoughts real quick on the secondary is it's easy to call him young, and I know that I mentioned how a young team could get, but it's important to really consider athleticism. And I think sometimes if you're super athletic, there's some of these mental mistakes, right? If you're in a little bit on coverage, you're out of position. If you're really quick, agile, athletically gifted, maybe you can make up some ground to where, I'm not a cornerback or a safety. I don't know, but that's just my guess. If you're really athletic, I think that maybe you can compensate for some of those mental mistakes.
I'd agree. Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement. I think the one thing that kind of stinks, so to speak, about having a young secondary is just that, if you get burned, there's probably not going to be another guy behind you, especially if you're playing this, kind of press coverage that, Don Brown likes so much. This isn't a case where, if you're a D lineman, maybe you get out of position, maybe you get pushed aside, but the linebackers will probably clean it up. If not, the safety will clean it up. And it's going to end up with maybe a 25, 30-yard play most of the time. You get burned in the secondary, it's probably going to the house. So that's I think the scary thing. But I agree. I think they got guys back there, and really I feel I feel very confident both the safeties are going to be nice players this year. I think the front seven is going to be one of the better front sevens in the country, but the corners are going to be a concern, and I think that might be where you see the growing pains as far as the defense is concerned.
I feel like I have a bunch of stuff to talk about, but I'll save some for tomorrow because we do have an availability. So we'll talk with some assistant coaches. I do want to mention real quick while I have the chance. I have a column on Chris Evans. Chris Evans has been a real popular topic. A lot of you guys out there have been asking me about Chris Evans. There's, can you be 1,000-yard rusher? And I think the easy answer would be to say yes, and because I do believe so. And I wrote a column. It'll be on FanRag Sports tomorrow. Follow at FanRag_U and at FanRag Sports. I explain why. Not only could he, but I explain why. And I break down some numbers. There are some patterns, I think, that needed to be cited in terms of the way that he runs. So I mentioned those. Of course, I have his commentary about, being asked about the freshman and sophomore leap and that sort of thing. So I think that if you really break down the numbers and break it down for what it is, that there's a valid case for Chris Evans to be a 1,000-yard rusher.